Hello, dear friends. It is a Sunday, April 14th. I happen to be in Bucharest, Romania, where I gave a week of lectures here at the university. I also spoke at the synagogue. And last night, of course, was the attack from Iran to the state of Israel, which was very concerning. And but as believing Jews, we know that God is with us, and eventually peace will prevail, and logic will prevail, and common sense will prevail with mankind, and God assists us when we do the right things in life. I'd like to talk about this parasha, this weekly portion, and the weekly portion is Tazria, and in the book of Leviticus, both Tazria and Mitzorah, which talk about various issues of purity and impurity in the laws of leprosy, which is a type of impurity in the biblical writings. So it's a sort of a pause between Parshat Shmini, where it talked about the death of the sons of Aaron, which will be picked up upon again in Parshat Achrei, which starts again from that point. Now, the interesting thing is the Haftarah, both of this week and next week, which of course is the prophetic readings, the readings from the prophets. And both of them are from the book of Kings 2, seem to hint to us that there is a major difference between the biblical idea of leprosy, and I think that's quite obvious, and what today we call leprosy. Leprosy today is Hansen's disease. I think it's a bacterial disease, which is catchy, and there are, of course, antibiotics and other drugs to take against it. The person can be cured from it. But the disease of leprosy mentioned in this week's Parsha, and specifically next week's Parsha, Mitzorah, seems to be a very unusual type of disease. Well, for one thing, it can attack not only the person's dermatology, the person's skin, but also the clothing, the house, the walls. And you don't call for a doctor, you'd call for the priest to come to the house and tell the person what to do. So it seems more like some type of spiritual disease than an actual biological disease of any sorts. And I think this is hinted to already in the Haftarah of this week and next. This week's Haftarah talks about the chief of staff of the army of Aram. Aram today is the area of Syria and Lebanon, who of course is a leper, and it seems that his whole life he was a leper, and which is very different than the leprosy mentioned in the Torah already. And even next week, which talks about the four Mitzoraim, the four lepers, who are outside the gates of the city of Shomron, Samaria. And according to our tradition, they were Gehazi, who was the assistant of Elisha the prophet and his three sons, because Gehazi was given, or at least Elisha cursed him, that he should have the same leprosy of Naaman, the chief of staff of Aram, for what he did. So again, it seems to be the non-biblical type of leprosy to sort of make us realize that what the Torah is talking about seems to be a very unique type of situation. And we actually see this in the Torah. If you remember in the book of Bamidbar, in Numbers, when Miriam and Aaron talk about Moses' wife, I think it's chapter 12. So God interferes and says, and appears to them and says, how dare you talk about Moses, my servant? He is faithful in all my house. In other words, you have no right to talk about him. You don't even understand what his level is about. And after this happens, Miriam becomes leprous. She has leprosy, and Moses prays for her recovery, saying, El Nara Fan Allah, oh God, please send her a speedy recovery, refuah, a healing. And Miriam was placed outside the camp for 7 days, and then she came back. So there you have uh, a disease which is caused by gossiping, by talking about somebody else. So, and this is one of the reasons for the biblical leprosy, according to the Talmud, gossiping and different types of. The Talmud gives a few reasons that such a thing happens, and all the reasons have to do with bad character traits. They have nothing to do with biology or the way a person treats their body. You know, they say they ascribe to the Chavetz Chaim, Israel Meir HaKohen, who died in 1935. They say, how come today, when a person has bad character traits or gossips about somebody, why don't they receive this leprosy mentioned in the Torah if it's has to do with character traits? So the Chavetz Chaim answered and said, they do receive it, we just don't see it anymore. So, in other words, there would seem to be some type of spiritual disease unrelated to the modern Hansen disease that we are familiar with, and it seems already in the time of the prophets it was different. Now, I would like to read the story of Naaman, the chief of staff of Aram, because it's a very interesting story, the way he understands the position of the prophet and the way the prophet understands his position in this story. So let's share the screen for a moment and read the Haftarah, the prophetic reading of this reading for the prophets of this week. Now, Naaman was the general of the king of Aram, Sar Tzava. Sar Tzava, of course, is the head of the army, what we call the chief of staff today. And he was a prominent man before his Lord and respected, for through him, God had given victory to Aram, and the man was a great warrior, and he was a Mitzorah. It's interesting that they say that God gave victory to Aram. Of course, we know that, especially by the end of the story, that Aram were pagans, and they went to Beit Rimon to bow down to their idols. But in the context of this story, that's the way it starts. Now, the Arameans, which is, of course, at that time Syria, went out in bands and captured the land of Israel. And they also captured in the land of Israel a young girl who ministered to Naaman's wife. So she is from the northern kingdom of Israel, this young girl. And she said to her mistress, the supplications for my master should be that he go before the prophet who is in Samaria, that he should cure him, which means your husband should go visit this prophet whose name is Elisha, because he has unusual powers and he has the ability to take away his leprosy. And he came and told his master, meaning, in the following manner has the girl from the land of Israel spoken. So, he came? So, in other words, she sent somebody, I guess, to speak. Excuse me. Naaman came and spoke to the king and said to the king, I heard from this young girl, or my wife heard from this young girl, that there is a prophet in the kingdom of Israel who can help me. Okay? So when it says he, even though it doesn't say who, we understand that it's Naaman who got this information, who's going to the king of Aram and saying to him that, this girl said such and such, and I would like to meet with this prophet. And the king of Aram said, okay, come, I will give you a letter to the king of Israel so that he should give you the meeting. He went and took in his possession 10 talents of silver, 6,000 gold pieces, and 10 suits of clothes. And the letter came to the king of Israel. King of Israel at that time is the son of Achav, Yehoram, the son of Achav. Both of them not great kings. The only difference is the Yehoram, the son of Achav, seems to have a better relationship with Elisha, the prophet. Now when this letter comes to you, behold, I have sent Naaman, my servant, and please cure him of his tzarat, of his leprosy. So, of course, when the king of Israel read the letter, he rent his garments, and he said, do I have the power from God to put to death and to life, that this person wants me to cure a man from his leprosy, from his tzarat? Just know now and see, he's looking for a pretext against me. He knows I can't do it. That's the way Yehoram understands it. But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had rent his garments, he sent him saying, why have you rent your garments? let Naaman come to me, and he will know that there's a prophet in Israel. Between the lines, I mean, because you don't seem to get it. So at least maybe he will. Now, story continues. Naaman came with his horses and his chariots, and he stood at the doorway of Elisha's house. Elisha, the prophet, who is the direct student of Elijah the prophet, and took over after him. And Elisha dispatched a messenger to him, meaning Elisha did not even come to the door. He sent a messenger, and he said, and the messenger told Naaman from Syria, the general, go and immerse yourself 7 times in the Jordan River, and your flesh will be restored to you, and you will become pure. In other words, it'll take care of your disease. Now, Naaman was incensed. He was angry. And he went away and said, here, I thought he would come out to see me. I thought he would stand and call on the name of his God. He would raise his hands towards the spot and cure my disease. But instead, he didn't even come to see me. And he tells me to immerse myself in a river. What do I need that river for? Aren't Amanan Parpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Why can't I immerse myself in them and become pure again? And he turned away in anger. The servants approached and spoke to him and said, Master, if the prophet spoke to you to do a difficult thing, would you not do it? And therefore, he told you a simple thing. Just do it. Immerse yourself and become pure. The Hebrew word is pure. And he went down and immersed himself in the Jordan 7 times, according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh became restored like the flesh of a young lad, and he became pure. And he returned to the man of God, he and his entire camp, because he was in shock. It actually worked. And he came and he stood before him, and he said, behold, now I know that there is no God in all of the earth except in Israel. And now accept a gift from your servant. And he said, and Elisha the prophet said, as God before whom I have stood lives, I will not accept a present from you. And he urged him to accept, but he refused. I don't do these things for gain. Naaman says, now if only your servant be given a load of earth as carried by the team of mules, for your servant will no longer give up burnt offerings or sacrifices to other deities, only to God. In other words, you should realize that all I want to do now is worship your God. I'm not interested in the gods of Aram, where I come from, anymore. But this thing may the Lord forgive your servant, when my master, the king of Syria, the king of Aram, today we call it Syria, comes to Beit Rimmon, which is where they have their deities, to prostrate himself there, he leans on my hand. And I have to prostrate myself also in Beit Rimmon with him. When I bow in Beit Rimmon, may God forgive your servant for this thing. Almost sounds like indulgences. Forgive me in advance. But his claim is, look, I have no choice and I don't believe in this anymore. And he said to him, go in peace, and he went some distance away from him. In other words, no answer. I'm not going to forgive you. I'm not going to anything. You do what you want to do. Just go in peace. So what happened here in this story? Number one, why did Elisha refuse to see him at the beginning until he came back and requested to speak to him? And what did Naaman think, and why did he get angry? And what did Elisha explain to him? Let's start with number one. Let's go to that verse, and Naaman becomes incensed. You will see that here I thought he would come out to see me. Okay, why didn't he come out to see him? After all, he is both a military and political head. He is coming from a country which is neighboring Israel, and later on will also become one of the enemies of Israel, and was in the past. The Talmud, the Midrash says that this fellow Naaman, in a previous story, just a few chapters before, in the book of Kings, there was a battle in which Yehoshaphat, the king of Judah, came together with the king of Israel, who was Achav. And they went to fight also Aram and Ramat Gilad, the Arameans, this nation, the Syrians. And because Achav was afraid, he asked Yehoshaphat to switch clothing with him, so that they would make mistakes between the kings. And they did. Yehoshaphat was okay with that. But somebody, it says, shot the bow and arrow, and the bow and arrow and his arrow pierced the chest of Achav, the king, the father of this king of Israel. And Achav was a brave man and a nationalist. And he said to the man helping him, hold me upright during the war so people don't realize that I was hurt, that I was wounded, so that our soldiers will keep fighting. And eventually he dies at the end of the battle. So the Midrash says, who is that guy who shot that arrow that accidentally killed Achav? It was Naaman, this guy. Because of that, Elisha could not even look at him. You killed the king of Israel. Okay, he wasn't a perfect king. He wasn't the greatest believer in God, let's say. But he was a nationalist who loved his people. And he was our king for good and for bad, and you killed him. Didn't want to speak to him. Didn't want to speak to him or see him. But he didn't want to tell him that. So why did he see him? In order to prove to Yehoram that there is a prophet in Israel. Number 2, listen to what Naaman said. Verse 11, here I thought he would come out to see me. We just explained why not. He would stand in front of me and call out in the name of his God, would raise his hand towards the spot and cure my disease. In other words, he'll do a little hocus pocus, call out to God, ask for special healing powers, touch me and or point towards me, and the disease will go away. Yes, this is the way the shamans work. This is the way a lot of people doing witchcraft and other types of healing would do things. But that's not what a prophet of God does. 2 things. First of all, prophet of God calls out to God for God to bring the healing, not necessarily for it to come naturally. But in order for this to happen, you cannot do it on the person. The person has to do it with you. The person has to want to come to the results. The person has to be in the same mindset as you. The person has to dunk in the Jordan 7 times to show that they have to be active. They have to do something. It's not the guy on the outside doing it. And this is the part that Naaman doesn't understand. Why do I have to do anything? He's the man of God. No, the man of God will help you if you try, if you pray, if you try to cure yourself of this, then yes, I can beseech God to give you that extra push, but it has to come from you. This is something Naaman didn't understand. That's the way the prophets work. They don't work like magicians. They pray to God. It's a different way for the world to work. So yeah, you could have gone to maybe to other rivers, but I told you which one you have to go to. So that's all you have to do. You have to follow it. You have to show you are pursuing this actively. I will pray that God helps you through this. So here you see a different approach to religion. This idea, it's not a hocus pocus. What we do are things that we are trying to create a relationship between us and God. We're trying to perfect something, and we're asking God to help give us that extra few inches or sometimes that extra few meters that we need in order to accomplish. But God helps those who help themselves. You have to show that you want this. You have to come towards in order to be helped. And that's what's happening in this story. At the end of the story, when he asks, be forgiven, I'm not here to give you forgiveness. And basically, Elisha just walks away. No forgiveness, no nothing. I helped you. And it's good that you came to this realization, and I'm sure he was happy to meet him because of this. But what you did, I still can't forgive you, what you did to the king of Israel. And there's no indulgences in Judaism that you can be told in advance to be forgiven there's something that you really should not be doing. That has to be something that you have to work out between you and your relationship with God. Anyhow, so I just wanted to point out this because I see this as a fascinating story between Naaman, the chief of staff of the army in Aram in Syria of the time, and his meeting with Elisha, the prophet of the northern kingdom. Shalom, shalom.